G'day and welcome to the Inforunners. I'm Execute. Today I'm joined by Paul, or the Astropub, and Algared. How are you boys doing today?
Good. I'm tired and it's not even Invictus yet, so I'm
Well, we sucked you in straight after a captain's table, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And the timer on his captain's table was 4 hours and 41 minutes, so you know it was a long one for him. So
kicking and
those
screaming.
bags under his eyes, that's legit.
So this episode today came about because for us, it's about a week after this is the episode I'm going to talk about has been recorded, but you guys haven't even seen it yet, so you can imagine how late this is after that one. But we did an episode on professional point of view on refining, and while we were laying out what the refining ships were, it kind of unfolded these other ships. And so we kind of realized that there's probably 9 ships that most people never even knew that possibly existed, and there were some that we didn't even know existed, and some connotations of that. And I kind of stumbled on it with the refining guys, and I've kind of presented it very briefly to Algared and Paul, but I thought it'd be a good thing to go over it again and lay it out for you guys and kind of get Paul's and Algared's reactions and hot takes and totally destroying me thinking this is a pie in the sky possible idea. So I will say this episode is heavily based on speculation, but it's based on I don't want to say rules, but things that CIG have said. So the first one being that there in every ship category there is a large, they're going to try and do a large, medium, small, and a capital, and and then basically based on things that they've said. So I'll go through it all. You guys can let us know in the comments if you think we're being ridiculous, you can think we're being silly, but I just thought it was a kind of fun episode because we stumbled on it, and there's these ships that, you know, 9 ships that we just didn't knew that were there, and we're rounding the 150 ship mark, so there's only about 50 to go, and if these 9 ships are there, that's almost a fifth of what's left. So it's kind of interesting, and so I'll lay it out. What I've done here is I've got Photoshop open in the background, and I can turn different layers on and off, but you guys will see that in this little I don't know what you want. It's not a diagram. What do I call that? Graph, lines and grids. But as you can see there, we have the 3 columns of table. Yeah, that's a good one. Table. We have mining, salvage, and refining. And you can the ships that I've got listed there are the ones that we know of, right? And obviously, you can see that there are 9 empty boxes, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So when we were going through, go ahead, Algared.
And the other thing to point out with this is that these 9 ships that we envisage or think possibly could exist, they're all non-pew-pew ships. So they're not combat ships. They're the industry ships and ships that fill out that area. And that is also doing something where we know CIG wants to move into. So that is really something that it does help us in terms of where we're thinking and what we're looking at. So
my camera died already.
I don't. Oh no.
I'm having lots of issues with this camera. It's fine.
There we go. It's back.
Yep.
So yeah. I'd also like to point out that there's 10 slots, not 9 slots.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No, there's 9 slots. Where's the 10?
No, there's 9 now because the reason there was 10 is you didn't have the Starfarer in there.
Yeah, I had to trick Paul somehow and make him look silly. That's fine. So yeah, but the main reason why the Starfarer was hidden is because originally we kind of thought the Starfarer was in the refining tree. This is kind of where it all started, but it's not. It's actually out in this tree on the right-hand side, because this is the one that we all kind of forgot about, is mining and gas, and this isn't actually mining. This is mining and ore. And when you actually break it down from a design perspective, it makes so much more sense to have a core pillar of refining that all 3 professions, meaning mining ore, mining gas, and mining salvage, feed into. And when you visualize it like that, you can now understand how a thing like refining can exist, where 3 professions are feeding into the one, where before there would have been either waiting around for mining, or there, it could have been I just think it works so much better with 3 feeding into one without getting into the long story of it. Does that make more sense to you guys too, if it's something like that where refining is being fed by 3 other professions?
Yeah, and it's also important to remember that a lot of these professions are going to mix in with one another.
Yeah.
Gases and ores are often put together for various different compounds, salvage. So you can use ore and recycled metals together. So say if you have a recycled aluminum and you have aluminum, they're still aluminum. You put them together to make more refined aluminum or whatever. They may have some weaknesses or impurities, but they can cheapen the cost of making aluminum. So there are other things you can see in this as well.
And what you're explaining there is essentially what we cottoned on to into the refining episode. So if you're interested in that, I'll chuck it up in the box up there and you can go look at that. But yeah, we're not going to go into refining today. I'll literally just turn them on, but I'm not really going to explain them. Algared?
Yeah.
The other thing was in the Expanse's Q&A, they talked about the Expanse being able to refine, ore, gas, and salvage.
But they coined it. They said ores. What was it? Ores, metals, and gases. I think they call it. So you have to go through the coding a little bit there, but that is literally what they're talking about. They're talking about the mining of ores, the mining of gases, and the refining. Yeah, you're spot on there.
And so the fact that they talk about that really does then feed into what Paul was just saying, and you've said as well, the way they'll cross-pollinate each other. And you look at the original sale for the Orion. The Orion was said, hey, it's a standalone, it's got refining, and yet it's got some, but it's never going to be as good as the Expanse. You look at the Expanse as compared to what we see in this Starfarer already, and the Expanse clearly can do more than what the Starfarer can do because it's got more refineries. And I imagine we'll see a similar thing with the Orion Reclaimer and whatever refining ship that's in that position is as well. So.
Yeah. So one other thing I do want to point out about this one specifically, which is the medium one, which I've nicknamed the Argo Heat because it's 4 letters long and it made sense to me, but is obviously where the Prospector works with the Expanse and the whole A and stuff like that. We're assuming there'll be a similar thing with the Mole and its counterpart refinery ship, which makes a lot of sense. You don't have to call it Heat, by the way. That's just the name that I thought sounded cool at the time. That's the first one I think that we'll probably see. I think unlike most ships where we've seen them kind of go like big, small, and then medium and large, this one, because I think with refining, we are definitely going to see a progression because once people learn of that multi-manufacturing and like as they go up, the bigger the ship is, the better it's going to be. It's really weird compared to some of the others, but there's obviously something potentially hidden there that we haven't seen yet that CIG could also have that changes it and it goes back to be like the other ships. But normally, even if you look at mining for an example, the bigger a ship gets, the more it can do, but then the counteraction to that is the more people it needs. So it still will be the same like that for refining as well. All right, so I'll just turn these other ones on real quick. So I haven't really called them anything. I've just refining large, refining capital. The other one that I'll knock off really quick is we know from the EU feature team, I think that's about a month and a half to 2 months ago now, is that chances are that this, the last mining one for ores will be a landminer. And that's purely just based on the fact that land mining is a thing, but we don't have the ship for it. The only ship that can do it is the Prospector. The other two are kind of more space locked, so to speak. And what I mean by that is you can't land in a mole and shoot a laser down because the things on the sides don't let you land, and obviously the Orion is locked to space. So Prospector's the only one for that. So it makes logical sense. If we've got land mining as a thing, the last ship has to be the thing that does it. It's pretty self-explanatory.
And it feeds in with Hurston as well. Hurston have, we know that Hurston have these great open pit mines, and so having vehicles or ships that do that open strip mining is something that would be useful. And that also ties in with what the Vandal driller does. It's strip mines, and so I could see a UEE version of a.
Does that make sense to you, Paul? Or
yeah. I mean, it's important to remember that just because it's a landminer doesn't mean that necessarily it won't also go into space, but it's designed as a large ship like the Prospector, where it can tilt down and just down mine, that kind of thing, as well as to land on an atmosphere.
I do think it will. Yeah, so that is the thing I thought about quite a bit, actually. Like, does it mean the mole is more likely, like if it's doing underground asteroid surface mining, because like again, how the prospector lands and mines. You are totally correct. It could just have to hover, but that does limit its factor. So yeah, I don't know. The mole for me is the biggest question mark of the mining tree, because it can either be just as good as everything else, or it's clearly the worst, which we'll just have to wait and see. Because if it's locked to just doing surface mining, that kind of sucks. But yeah, we'll have to wait.
But then if you look at the mining ore pattern that you've just got there, you've got the prospector, which can do space and land. You've got the mole that really excels at doing asteroid mining. You've got a landminer, which could be a spaceship, could be a land vehicle, but does land mining, could do other stuff. And then you've got the Orion, which we know can never leave, can never really land on a planet and mine. And so you've got, if you think of it in terms of land space, you've got land space, land space. So small land, large land, small space, large spaceship.
I just want to point out though, there's nothing to stop the landminer from landing on an asteroid and mining it as well.
No.
Yeah. So yeah.
No, I could see a Vandal driller doing that type of thing as well, just going to an asteroid that's rich and just sucking it up and chewing it to bits. Small scale Orion type operation. But yeah.
So moving on to salvage, like when I look at the Vulture, I always use the example of the Vulture to kind of explain what this medium one would be. So the Vulture, you've got to put blast charges on the ships to blow them apart before you can do it. So obviously the next step above that would be to include lasers on the medium, so it doesn't have to use the blast charges. And then obviously you could take like the Reclaimer. We know it's got the processing room, so it just loses the processing room, and there you go, you've got the large salvage. So you can kind of see and kind of work out roughly what they're going to have in almost all of these. I don't know, you guys tell me, what do you think about those salvage ships, and what do you think they could be?
I will say, I think that we're going to start seeing, because CIG definitely has a thing for drones, and we have yet to see a salvage drone. So there's supposed to be some on the Reclaimer.
There are. I didn't think of that. That's a really good. That's a really good call. I like that.
Think of something like the Vulcan, but with specifically designed for salvage operations. I could also definitely see something that's more along the lines of, because we've got the Drake, which is the dirty, nitty gritty, tiny ship that's designed for remote operations, and the Reclaimer, which is this big, gigantic, enormous, overbuilt monstrosity that's designed for this, built by Aegis. You still have spaces for Argo, which would fit really well in there, and MISC, which would also fit very well in there for those different styles where you have something that's more of a utilitarian. We're going to build this. This is designed to process salvage and then get it back to another plant or whatever. Something that's designed to salvage things for not necessarily industry, but for infrastructure, which would be the Argo sort of things, and then MISC being something more of designed for, you're going to make money off of this. This is designed as an operation, rather than one being basically a garbage. Like the difference between like a garbage truck and a recycling center. Like the Argo version of this would be more like a garbage truck, and the MISC version would mostly be like a recycling facility.
Yeah. Well, it depends.
And a lot of people.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, a lot of people forget that MISC are their main ship building area, the area where they make most of their money is their heavy industry. So they're a heavy industry company. They do that quite a lot. Worthwhile having a read of, if you get Jump Point, the latest Jump Point with the updated MISC portfolio. Just some nice little interest in there. But you were saying Drake, and I 100%, I could see a Drake salvage ship, because when you go back to the early lore for Drake have they basically have salvage yards. They're effectively out on the frontier. They've got their salvage yards. They've got their dirt cheap ships cobbled together with the salvage from the junkyards and all the other stuff. To me, it's a perfect fit for Drake. I know people will say, "Oh no, Drake are pirates," but a legitimate side. a salvage ship
Drake,
working in that area would work perfectly.
Drake already have the Vulture though, you see. So I think for me, what you said, Pauline, Argo, and Misk, the only other manufacturer I'd probably chuck in there, and you correct me if you think I'm wrong here, both of you, would be Consolidated Outland.
Yeah,
and go ahead.
It's not their style, but I could see it.
They're
Honestly, I believe that.
You go ahead.
I was going to say, I actually believe that Consolidated Outland might build the Landminer.
That was what I was about to say.
Yeah,
it's actually my number one runner for the Landminer because of the other manufacturers that have been used. I think it's the front runner for that.
Well, also because the thing that we have to understand is that CIG is basing Consolidated Outland off of Elon Musk. Like Silas Kerner is Elon Musk. Everything it's not a secret. And the one thing that Elon Musk has that they haven't really reflected in the game yet is the Boring Company, which is a company that's designed to bore holes, which is why you'd have Landminer would make sense for that. You don't really have tunnel drilling technology in Star Citizen, but mining, yeah. So
drilling, mining, very close. Yep.
Yeah.
I can say that. I didn't think of that. That actually makes so much more sense now you've said that though. So yeah. As for the last two there,
That'd be the Consolidated Boar.
Yes, the Boar.
The Boar.
Snooze.
So yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's old man Harrison picking on that boring fella Silas.
Yeah, so after we kind of realized what's on there so far when I was talking to the refinery guys, the thing that really came to me is once I thought, I might not be able to work out what's in this gas tree because we've only got one ship and normally I need two to be able to kind of work it out. But when I sat there and analyzed it and thought about it, I used the mining ore tree, and using the mining ore tree, I was able to figure out another one. And this is the one that really kind of blew my mind when I thought of it. And I don't know if it had the same effect on you guys, but what it was a ship that mines nebulas. So akin to the Starfarer that goes down to gas giants and grabs stuff, but it's like the Orion, it's locked to space, so it has to go to nebulas to get its gas. And I was like, whoa, that's a big ship. And the thing that we visualized when we were talking about it in the group was, those ships that are like the really big spheres that carry oil and stuff, but in space. So it's just these giant spheres that go through and kind of, or not giant spheres, but if you know the tankers I'm talking about, flying through space and sucking up all the nebulas into those gas canisters.
Yeah, and also Lagrange points, because we see all this spacescaping. CIG is not making spacescaping just for pretty. They're going to do something with it. So,
yeah.
What do you think of that though as a ship? Do you think that that's a possibility?
Al?
Yeah, look, I think a capital ship that's doing the gases is certainly something that's down there. I cannot see the Starfarer being the only gas harvesting ship or the largest gas harvesting ship, especially when it's already got, it's got a couple of refineries, but it's also the key refueler.
And I mentioning that refueling is, I think that's why it has refueling, is because it's so similar to the one above it. It needed something else to kind of make it a bit more special, and so that's why it's got the refueling mechanic as well.
And being smaller than the one above it as well. But I could also see the nebula miner, or what being the main, being a ship you'd station above somewhere like Crusader, and it'd skim the surface and just suck up the.
I don't know if they'll let it go into atmosphere, but if it does, it'll only be in the gas giants, because gas giants obviously have a lower atmosphere. But it could even be on a atmospheric basis, like some gas giants that can go into and others that can't because of how big it is. But there's no reason you can't use an SRV to pull it back out too. That's another thing. So yeah. So after I had those two, I was like, well, that kind of pretty much takes the space out of the equation. So what would the last two be? And the first one that kind of came to me was, I was thinking of Cellin, is all the geysers on Cellin. So literally like a little ship that just caps the geysers and pumps it out type of thing. I don't know. What do you think of that? Too simple?
No, it makes sense. Geyser Tapper makes sense, especially since we know multiple places in Star Citizen have been described as having cryovolcanoes or geysers or something like that. So being able to go to various locations and go, hey, this is a cryovolcano. I'm going to get ice out of this thing. So I can just sit here and harvest hydrogen and oxygen and other elements that can come in out of this. Whereas this is more of sulfur. We can pull sulfur out, and then you can use some of those elements for other purposes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
This next bit's a bit speculatory as well. I also envisioned this ship being a gas liquid transporter exclusively. And the reason I explain that is that say you were transporting liquids or gases on a hull A in the small containers, they have to land, unload the ship, and then it can be transported. But we do know there are large gas containers on some of the space stations. So if this thing can just fly straight up and transfer straight into the space station and then leave, it speeds that whole process up. So I think we may actually see some specialized cargo ships around ores and gases and salvage.
Yeah.
I think it might be a thing. I'm not certain on it, but gas specifically, I can totally see that as a thing. Especially if it's still mining and doing the cargo. Sorry, Algared.
I could see a liquid transporter being really key for that as well, because one of the things we know that we need hydrogen to fuel our ships and to power our plants and everything else. We need oxygen to keep our atmosphere and us alive in the stations and that. So having a station, I imagine, can do electrolysis, splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen.
Yep.
You might decide that needs to be on a refinery ship. So having a ship that's actually literally geared for harvesting water and taking it to a station or where it's needed is going to be a key element in terms of survival. It's a Canterbury.
I don't disagree.
From to pick up the Expanse idea.
And the last,
100%.
And the last one was a drilling liquid miner, so almost similar to the Landminer, but specifically at liquids, kind of like how you see today with ships mining oil from under the ground. That said, the other thing I'll say this after you guys have said your piece, though. So yeah, what do you think about that? A liquid driller.
I mean, the only thing that is going to require some tech to be invented, which would be having deposits of liquid and other stuff under the ground that you could then, gather through mining.
You don't need it actually, because you can fake it all with just the HUD of the ship. So, because we had to think about this when they were doing the professional point of view for mining, and if you've just got the planet, if you say there's a node under there, like it's done with code, like it's just under there, it can show it on the HUD of your ship, but you never physically go underground, do you? You're just pulling it out, so you can fake it from under the ground. You can process and simulate that there's an ore that's been created there, and if it's liquid, you've just put your pump in, and it's just basically emptying a tank. And if it's doing ore, it's the kind of same thing. You're breaking it up and sucking it out. You don't actually have to be there.
If you go to a river on Microtech, you're just sucking water. Put your tube down into the river and just sucking up the water with all the fish and everything else, and then you've got to sort them.
He's talking.
Get the frogmen out of the.
Algared, he was specifically talking about stuff under the ground though that you can't see, and that's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to explain how you can actually do it without actually having to do it. You can fake it.
You can do it through quanta, basically, where it's like it exists as digital, and then you don't have to actually actually show it.
And that was the key takeaway for me. Once I realized they could do it on the hologram parts of the ship, I was like, oh wow, they could just fake everything. And it'll feel real as hell, because I was like, are they going to actually allow you to dig under the ground? I was like, no, that's not going to actually work. Like, how are they going to do it? And then once I kind of connected all the dots,
a bit like the outpost with the mining outpost. You just see the machines working, but
that's it.
We're not seeing them suck anything out of the ground. It's just the same.
Well, they'll have some kind of hologram to represent it, but it'll be it'll be on your screen. You won't actually be seeing it in the game. And I'd say the same. Even if you're sucking water up from a river, you're not going to see the water going up the tube because it's a solid tube. You'll just see the hologram saying, "Oh, your tank's filling up." Yep. So the last thing I kind of want to add before we head off is obviously this is a grid of 16 ships here. The ones that we're filling the gaps in with, there obviously could be some cross-pollination here. So, for example, that Landminer and the liquid miner, they could be the same ship. So there is a possible 9 ships there. Not saying that that's exactly what's going to happen, just based on the fact that, you know, they've said they're trying to get a ship into every single category. There's also other categories that could come out there, because like someone could argue that the Starfarer is also in the refueling tree, but I think refueling is not a full tree. I think it's going to be maybe only 1 or 2 ships that can do that. And the other thing I'll put in there is, like, you've got the Vulcan. When I talked to Badgers about this, he brought the Vulcan up, because technically that's in the repair tree, but it's also in the refueling tree. So there is going to be some cross pollination, and so I don't think we will see all of these ships, but I just want to put it out there so you're at least thinking about them, so you can plan your feats accordingly, because I think we can definitely agree that mining for gas is going to be a thing. It's just something that was out of sight, out of mind, and they've never really kind of talked about it. But again, there might not be 4 ships in that tree, so I just want to give you guys that caveat. Get the ball rolling and start thinking, because the big takeaway for me was, like, if there's a refining capital ship and a refining miner, I've only got half those industry ships that I need. There's another, you know, $500 each potentially or more for 2 ships that I'm possibly going to want in my fleet. And that was the thing. I was like, oh crap, I need to start saving. But yeah. So,
yeah. No, I agree. I'll kind of finish this up by my own thoughts by saying, like, a lot of this stuff is stuff that we're going to start seeing come in as stuff starts to become more fleshed out.
Yep.
So as we see mining and refining process becoming more granular, when you start seeing, you know, like when the expanse is fully out, those sorts of things, you're going to start to see some of this gaps, or CIG will start seeing some of these gaps if they don't already see some of these gaps, and you'll start seeing them plug away. For anybody who might be doubting any of these, I will also like to remind people that for many, many moons, I complained that there needed some sort of ferry ship, some sort of ship to be able to carry smaller ships longer distances, and that was going to be needed for Pyro. We talked about it when we talked about that, just how big systems are. And then they released the Liberator because they realized they needed to make a big ship that could carry other ships. So these are all examples of things that we'll probably see in some way, shape, or form down the line as the game progresses, just because of the nature of building a complex refining and mining systems that they were wanting to build. So
just to
I agree.
Piggyback on the back of what, hang on, just to piggyback on the back of what you kind of said there, Paul, this little grid that we've got down here, I guarantee you there's some designer somewhere at CIG that has this grid, but for every ship in the game and every profession. And they're just like picking where they want them to go and making them. Yeah. Sorry, Algared, go ahead.
And you look at mining. When mining first came out, it was just the prospector doing a little bit. Now we've got, you know, the gadgets and other things. And so we are seeing the evolution of that profession tree. And I've got no doubt salvage is going to be as detailed, mining gas is going to be as detailed, and refining is going to be as detailed. And so, which really does open up the world for the different varieties. And if I could work out why my camera has gone completely,
it's just bandwidth,
dumpy.
Dude. It's bandwidth. You got low bandwidth from your end. The one thing I'd like to add to, you know, those mining charges you were talking about, I can't unsee them as, you know, they talk about the blast charges that blow apart the salvage. They're just that for mining. So I'm seeing like similar traits
breaching
from
charges.
from one thing breaching to another.
They are definitely not breaching charges, sir. I don't know what you're talking about. They're completely legitimate salvage and mining use to break up hard rock and other facilities.
And help you take that door away, you know, salvage that door.
We at Drake Interplanetary do not at all condone the use of this beyond its initial specifications. That's all I'm going to say, all right?
Dual use.
Now, I gotta kind of agree with my colleague from Drake. You know, we don't do those types of nasty things. We're always about legitimate business practices. Some of us are more legitimate than others, however.
Drake blast charges coming to a salvage near you. All right. Well, with that, let us know your thoughts in the comments below, because obviously this is probably going to have a lot of discussion. I already know that I've talked to about quite a few people, and that whole extra tree that I kind of always knew it was there, but I just kind of didn't lay it out. And when I laid it out with the refining guys, I was like, holy shit, this just makes so much sense to have 3 professions feeding into refining. and it just elevates refining to a totally different level. Like, I thought it was just this little side thing, kind of like refueling, but now it's its whole tree easily. And if you go and watch the, like, I'll put it up in the cards, but if you go watch the refining episode, it was really obvious to me that refining is going to be like a real powerhouse, a real part of the like, it is basically manufacturing for players. It's the closest we're going to get.
And my brain hit something. Another reason why all this stuff is going to happen, and the reason why we haven't seen it yet, is because if you listen to the last Todd Pappy interview that was done with
Sandy,
with Disco Lando.
No? Oh, okay.
Todd Pappy talked about how he wasn't happy that they had to move away a lot of their resources from the PU to the Squadron 42 because he wanted to do loops, gameplay loops. He wanted to get professions fleshed out, and this is what professions fleshed out looks like. So I can almost guarantee you, this is what you'll see in 2 years.
Yeah,
you'll start to see these things popping off in sometime middle next year, end of next year, and start releasing sometime a little bit after that, just because these are needed for the future.
And I think we could take another 4 professions and do a grid like this as well. So we may do this at a future date with some other professions, but it just became really obvious to me you're able to go sideways and use some of the other professions to work it out, not just up and down. So yeah. Anything you want to add?
I think the other one is, I think the other thing is, in the past, we just looked at, mining as being mining / ore, mining ore / gas. But I think it is really a grounds to actually say there's mining ore and there's also the mining gas, and there's 2 separate, and they're parallel branches of the mining tree itself, and that just opens up the world.
I always thought mining was so much more powerful than salvage, but by splitting them in 2 like this, you can all of a sudden see how salvage does stand on its own. It is equal to ore and it is equal to gas, but I think if gas and ore were together, way too strong. And that's why I always had people say, "Oh, I'm going to get the Orion because it just does everything," and people always put the Reclaimer behind. But now when I lay it out like this, the Reclaimer is going to be just as powerful as the Orion, easily, in my book now. So, yeah. All right, well, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Like this video if you like this video. You know what to do in that regard. If you want to subscribe, do that as well. If you want to go the extra mile on Patreon, you can do that as well. Paul, where can people find you, mate?
Twitch.tv/theastropub and youtube.com/theastropub. I stream live on Twitch Thursdays and Fridays, and then in the evenings, and then in the afternoons, Saturdays and Sundays. And I do content like similar to this. I do
your
lore stuff with Algared as well, where we do lore citizen stuff. So. Lore Citizen Podcast. So if you enjoy lore, you like discussions like this, come join me there. You also find these 2 on Captain's Table every so often too. So
yep.
And don't forget, leave your comments.
And sorry,
so go on.
No, go. I was going to make a joke. It's fine.
I was going to say, don't forget, leave your comments. We do, believe it or not, read every single comment. We don't always respond to every single comment, but we do actually read every single comment. But remember, be respectful and treat each other, or be awesome to everyone, I suppose is our catchphrase.
Be excellent to each other.
But yeah, subscribe, hit that bell.
It's from Bill and Ted. Algared, you're showing your age. Your age is showing.
Yeah. It was an excellent adventure. Get over it.
All right, cool. All right, with that, you guys have a good one. We'll see you next week.